Hey, welcome. You ever get the feeling the world is just getting more and more chaotic? Yeah, a lot of us do. Well, today we're going to dig into a specific framework from Islamic theology that's all about finding an anchor in that storm. So let's jump right in. I mean, it's a question on a lot of our minds, right? You turn on the news, you scroll through your feed, and it's just one thing after another. Conflict, unease, you name it. But here's the thing. The source material we're exploring today, it actually says this feeling isn't new at all, and it offers a really specific way to understand what's going on. And this quote really sets the stage. It's a pretty intense perspective, right? It's basically saying that this feeling of things getting worse year after year isn't just random bad luck. No, it frames it as a predicted pattern, a consistent decline that's actually headed somewhere specific. Okay, so let's dive into that first part. What does this turmoil actually look like? What are the specific signs the texts point to as proof that we're in this really turbulent time? So, according to these sources, it's really about the breakdown of some core values. We're talking about knowledge just vanishing, greed becoming the norm, and, well, you see it here, more turmoil, more violence. The texts also talk about this blurring of what's right and wrong. Things that were once out of bounds become common, and people just stop caring if the money they're making is earned the right way. It's this loss of a solid foundation that the whole framework we're going to look at is designed to fix. And this is the key takeaway. Really, from this perspective, none of this is random. It's not just a string of bad luck or one crisis after another. It's all seen as part of a predictable pattern, signs of a final era. And that, of course, leads to the big question. If all this is happening, how in the world are you supposed to stay grounded? And that's where we get to the heart of it. The texts don't just point out the problem. They offer a solution, an anchor, and it's built on three really solid foundations. So let's get into what they are. It's actually a pretty simple framework when you break it down. It says that real, lasting stability comes from knowing three things, inside and out. First, knowing God. And not just in a vague sense, but really understanding his role as the one and only creator. Second, knowing the religion, Islam, as the practical guide for how to live. And third, knowing the prophet, Muhammad, because his life and his teachings are the human example of how to put it all into practice. All right, so let's zoom in on that first foundation, because it's the big one. It's the absolute bedrock of this entire worldview, the concept of God's complete and total oneness. This idea has a name, Tawheed. And it's everything. It's the core belief that God is one. Period. No partners, no equals. He's the only creator, the only one keeping everything going. And because of that, all worship, all devotion has to go to him and him alone. You can see how this directly pushes back against something like widespread greed, right? It shifts your focus from chasing worldly stuff to connecting with God. Now, one of the best ways to get what Tawheed is to understand what it isn't. And its direct opposite is called shirk. Shirk is basically associating partners with God. It's directing any kind of worship or devotion to, well, anyone or anything else. And in this tradition, that's considered the biggest sin you can commit because it breaks that number one rule, God is one. And this comparison makes it super clear. On one side, you've got Tawheed, all worship goes to God alone. On the other, shirk, that worship gets split up. It's as simple as that. One is the foundation of faith, the other completely undermines it. You know, the source text has this really cool way of explaining this. It just asks these simple, common sense questions to get you thinking. Like this one, who creates the rain from the sky? And the answer given is pretty direct. It's Allah who sends the rain, who makes the trees grow, and who brings out the fruit. And this logic applies to everything, the cycle of day and night, the sun and the moon, the land, the sea, all of it. This idea that God is the exclusive boss of the universe, that's a huge piece of what Tawheed is all about. Okay, so once that foundation of knowing God is solid, the framework moves on to part two, knowing the religion itself. This is where we get into the specific beliefs and practices that are meant to guide your everyday life. And these are probably the most well-known part, the 5 pillars. These are the big ones, the core duties that turn belief into action. You've got the declaration of faith, praying 5 times a day, giving to charity, fasting during Ramadan, and making the pilgrimage to Mecca. Think of them as the structure, the rhythm of daily life that keeps you connected and grounded.
Another massive piece of this puzzle is the belief in a last day. The idea here is that this life, it's a test, and after it's over, everyone will be brought back for a final judgment, where your good deeds are weighed against your bad ones. This gives every single action you take real weight and consequence, and it's a huge motivator to stay on the straight and narrow, especially when it comes to things like earning money dishonestly, which, if you remember, was one of those signs of turmoil we talked about at the start.
Okay, so let's connect the dots. How does all this, knowing God, the pillars, the last day, how does it all help you navigate a world that feels like it's spinning out of control? Let's tie it all together. This quote here is wow. It's a real call to action. It warns about a time that's so confusing, so full of trials, that a person could be a believer in the morning and a non-believer by evening. It's talking about a time when people are willing to sell out their core beliefs for just a little bit of worldly gain. And that is the whole point. This framework we've been walking through, knowing God is one, knowing the practices of the religion, following the prophet's example, and putting it all into action with good deeds, this is presented as the anchor. It's the toolkit you need to hold on tight when things get rough. It's basically a roadmap for keeping your spiritual balance when the world outside feels like it's completely lost its own. So that kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. The sources we've looked at here offer a very specific spiritual anchor. But it makes you think, right? No matter what you believe, when the world feels this chaotic and unpredictable, what keeps you steady? What's your anchor in the storm?